Welcome back to the ND and Free podcast, brought to you by the Awareness Space Podcast Network. This is a podcast all about neurodivergence and is powered by you, the listener. We answer, discuss, and expand on your questions. Myself, Owen Morgan, and my team of co-hosts dive into all things ADHD, autism, and other neurotypes. We believe all NDers deserve to live a life free of the shame we may feel, free from the burden of trying to fit in, and free from the burnout caused from not honouring our needs. We are ND and Free. So we are back for another ND and Free podcast episode. Alongside me, Owen Morgan, I have my wonderful co-host, neurodivergent therapist and ADHD coach in training, Philippa Balazs, and neurodivergent assessor and speech and language therapist, Alice Cantwell. I'm an ADHD coach, wellbeing coach, and I have been in the wellbeing sector for 15 years, previously working as a personal trainer and massage therapist, and the host of multiple podcasts in which I've interviewed over 500 people. Right, welcome back. I am sat down, like I said, with Alice and Philippa today, and we're going to be talking all things PDA in and around that, and then we'll finish with a fun quiz at the end, all based on someone's special interest. So, Alice, welcome back. Now reflecting on our first episode a month ago, how are you feeling about all this, and are you excited to see where this may take us?
Yeah, I absolutely love it, and I feel like it's because the posts have got out kind of weekly as well as the guys' ones. I feel like no time has passed in between that. I'm like, oh, it's come around, yippee, to kind of get back in and talk about it all. So I'm excited.
Oh, good. Yeah, because I can drip feed out the trailers, don't I? And they're stretched out. So
Yeah.
for you two, it's like, oh, there we are again. Which is good for me as well, because I don't feel like I have to constantly record, which is great. And Philippa, how have you found the whole experience and seeing all our content out there in the world?
Yeah, it's great. Again, like Alice, I look forward to it, and it gives me something to focus on and think about. Oh, I'm gonna go away and do some research on that particular topic and deep dive, and keeps me and my knowledge really fresh. So yeah, I think it's great.
Oh yeah, definitely. And what I get out of it most is it's just really nice to get off my chest things that just for the month gone by, kind of in this container of a show, where we get to share a few bits on topics that relate to us. So I know I find it quite therapeutic as well. So thank you for that one. All right, we always kick off before we talk about our main topic with one thing we have learned about ND since our last show. It can be a personal reflection or something that you've read or heard about. Like me and the boys said, we started talking about medication. We were there for about 25 minutes. So just share something briefly that you've gone through that could be useful for the audience. So over to you, Alice. Is anything that's come up?
And I will keep it brief because I imagine lots of people can go on about it. But the new SEND white paper has been kind of released, lots of things about EHCPs, the change about that in schools, which I think it's good to post about. I'm not too sure about some of the elements. I understand the reasoning why about reducing the amount of EHCPs, because basically there's too many and it's too expensive. But for me, that highlights that there's a need there, but they're kind of working away from that, and people are having plans, but there's questions about kind of accountability for that for children and parents, which it's going to be interesting to see. But I'll keep it there because otherwise I think we could go on all day about that.
No, that's interesting. These little nuggets give people opportunities to go and look these things up, and explore things. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And for you, Philippa, anything come up?
Yeah, so I found there was a post on Instagram. Somebody posted about how they didn't know, and I didn't know, that autism was actually discovered by a woman. So we all think that autism was discovered by men, and that's not true. It was discovered by a Ukrainian child psychiatrist called Dr. Grunya Sukareva, and she also observed autistic characteristics in girls long before anyone else did, back in 1925. But her work was all in Russian, so it wasn't translated into English until 2020. Can you believe that? So that just blew my mind. I was like, wow, how has that been taken 100 years to come out, to be unearthed? So yeah, that blew my mind.
Yeah, essentially the timeline is for all of this is insane, isn't it? How recent everything is, and how much has had to shift very quickly. I guess that's a good thing, but it's still kind of mind blowing, isn't it? how we've got to this point. But yeah, thank you so much for that. And for me, I was just listening to some stuff about where did this all begin? Where did ND begin? Hunter-gatherers and all that. I've been finding all that very interesting. Is it? They say maybe 5% of the population then had the brains that say we have, because it was a very useful survival tool for them. And now in 2026, that 5%, instead of being 10 people across an entire part of the country, is now millions of people in a world that doesn't require us to hunter and gather. Anyway, I just thought it was very interesting, and that might be partly why we struggle so much, because our skills aren't being used in the way they should be. I don't know. Very interesting stuff. But there you go. All right, thanks. That was lovely. So we are looking at PDA today. So that it could be pathological demand avoidance, if you'd like, or it could be pervasive drive for autonomy. It's not a political thing. It's whatever words you want to use. I love pervasive drive for autonomy because I'm like, yes, I can do this, which feels slightly nicer. So we'll look at sort of how it shows up. What is PDA and what are boundaries? So how can we honor our truth and lead our life by the way we want to, which isn't technically PDA. That's like a value set. So we'll talk about that. And how our past has shaped our self-worth, really, and our need for autonomy. So looking at what's happened to us, creating this need for us to prove ourselves, I suppose, and how we can avoid avoidant behavior because we know what's going to happen to us. We just don't do anything, which is really, really sad. So let's jump in. So for you, Alice, as far as PDA goes, what is your personal experience? Do you experience this? To what level? That will kick us off quite nicely, I think.
So I never thought I did, because I think, and generally society's understanding of PDA, I'm also with you on kind of pervasive, persistent drive for autonomy, because it sounds less horrendous for me personally. And I think that knowledge of it's kids, that you ask them to do something and they say no, they don't do it, they might melt down, they might kick off. So I was like, yeah, that's definitely not me. I've worked with lots of children that do experience PDA, and lots of it is in lots of elements come into it, but the subtleties of language. But as obviously I've kind of developed in my career, gone through my own neurodivergent assessment post-diagnostic journey, I 100% have elements of PDA. And I think there was a question on some forum somewhere of, is it consistent or can it only show up at certain things? I think there's that level there, but in certain elements, or even with certain people, it almost like I can't control it and it just comes out. And I think because I'm aware of it, it's almost harder. I anticipate that is what's going to happen, and it's really difficult dealing with what that feels like inside, and maybe how that comes across to other people, and yeah, of kind of being able to manage that. And it is really hard. So yeah, definitely do experience it.
I so much I can say about that, but I'll hand straight to you, Philippa. What are your personal experiences?
Yeah, well, I was diagnosed in childhood with oppositional defiance disorder, which doesn't get used much now. And I really identify with PDA terminology, with the descriptors. I think that probably back in the 90s, ODD was PDA. It was not well understood. It was more behavioral focused. So we're looking just at the behavior, the observable behavior. And what PDA does is it actually looks beyond that a little bit. It's looking at, okay, so there's the observable behavior, but what's driving the behavior? And we know that it is that drive for autonomy. And that drive for autonomy comes from a place of anxiety, high anxiety, of needing to feel safe, that, that nervous system response. So I think for me, reframing that through that lens as an adult, going, PDA, what is that? I've never heard of that. And then suddenly mapping all of that onto my original diagnosis from 30 years ago, going, that's what that is. That is exactly what that is. And that was not the correct terminology back then. So for me, there's been a bit of a kind of shift. Historically, I've moved from one label to another label, and one that actually fits me, if that makes sense.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to jump in as well, because I think that and actually the confusion kind of between parents, adults of those two is really, really still common. And obviously PDA isn't a diagnosable condition. It's a profile, just like we have alexithymia and all sorts of other things. Of actually, it just helps describe elements of that person, doesn't it? And it's not that you are PDA. And obviously some people could be like, it shows up all day, every day in my life, and some people not so much. But I think it's useful to have that extra kind of profile to me, because I think that can make, say, an autistic person who has a profile of PDA look very different to an autistic person that doesn't, or an AuDHD or an ADHD person. And I think that's, again, it just kind of whittles that back down to each individual profile is so different.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think what I was going to respond to with this is, if we just take away the letters and everything, or we often think of, take away the letters for a second and just think about this, just the word autonomy, really. And we just need elements of autonomy in our day. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And maybe we have a adverse or more extreme response to not having it. I guess that's in a nutshell. We have a emotional response to that, and that's kind of just what you're working with, really. And how can you sculpt a life for that? I know lots of neurodivergent people who are entrepreneurs. So many are, and there's a reason for that. They want to space out their day and be able to deliver what they want to deliver in a way that feels right to them. I think these are all really good traits. And who wouldn't, I guess, want to have a day where they're in control, I guess, and their destiny is in their hands, and it's not a higher power in retail, for example, like me, that is controlling everything we're doing. I think there's something in that. And I think with children and my stepson and stuff, just if we need him to do something, if we add an option to it, it works every time, because it gives him some power back. It gives him some autonomy. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to do this first or this first? He's like, oh, I'll do this first. And that means that we're actually getting stuff done. Whereas if we're like, right, go and do that, that's when things start to become a little bit tricky. So I think it's just walking around the A part of the PDA and how can we integrate that into our life? Because you could work in a place where, a bit like myself, I suppose, where I am a really good worker. I was brought up to work hard and to be respectful. And no matter what your job is, do it with a sense of pride and meaning. So therefore I can do any job, and I'm highly respected. So they never tell me to do this or go quicker, or I don't get any of it, because I've built that up over time. And now I have full control over a role that isn't even so you can control, but I've done it. So maybe we're just very clever at finding ways to meet the PDA stuff along the way. Yeah. So I might have been rambling there, but that was what came up for me. But what do you think, Alice, in regards to what's PDA and what is just natural autonomy needs and being able to have an element of control? We all want a little bit of that. I mean, how do we know where the boundary is, I
think that is so hard, because I think that there is so much mixed in with that, especially us, or kind of neurodivergent people anyway, of kind of feelings, well, can not feel big, but sometimes they do feel really big. So I kind of base it on how significant is it in that person's life. So say when someone's coming for an assessment and we're talking through these things, whether it's a child or an adult, and actually there's things coming up of like, actually in kind of high demand areas, situations, you're really struggling. What is the impact? Is it that you just don't like it? Or is it that it causes you to melt down, to shut down, to become completely dysregulated? For me, it's the functional impact on that, not just on your kind of ability to carry on your daily tasks, your emotional well-being, your nervous system, everything like that. So I always think of it as impact. I don't think there's like a numerical finite way to be like, this is the boundary where it stops. I think when it causes significant impact in your life more than it doesn't, I think that for me is the boundary when I look at kind of people and profiles.
Philippa, what are your thoughts on this one? It's an interesting one, knowing who we truly are and our values and what we live by, but also what our brain's up to, what our body's doing to us in response to how we see the world.
Mm. Well, knowledge is power. If you don't know what's happening internally and why it's happening, it's really difficult to change anything. And if you don't know about your potential PDA profile, if no one's ever told you about it, if no one's ever explained it, how will you know what that is? And so, from a therapeutic perspective, I talk about it all the time, but if there are behaviors that you don't understand about yourself and why you do it, it will create a lot of shame. There'll be a lot of shame around it. And so, yeah, understanding what is the function of the PDA behaviors, what's it serving, and it's a protection mechanism. Everything is always goes back to safety, I think, really. It's about, right, I need autonomy. Why do I need autonomy? Well, maybe it's because I grew up with very little autonomy. Maybe I grew up with very authoritarian parenting styles. Maybe I went to a very, very strict school and I had so as an adult, how do I create autonomy for myself, and how does it show up? So it's exactly what Alice is saying, really. It's when does it become, I guess, problematic in life that maybe it's difficult to hold down a job because a job feels such a strong demand that it can't be sustained, and it impacts well-being. And I think this is where masking comes in, because actually people with demand avoidance can mask it really well for long periods of time, but there's a huge cost associated with that and their well-being. So, it's, yes, okay, we can put up with some demands for some period of time, but ultimately there'll be a cost associated with that. So it's just looking at how that shows up.
Yeah, thank you. There's something really important to sort of acknowledge as well, isn't it? Is that with the way the dopamine works and the way it's passed through the brain, and how much do we have, how much do we not have, that it's quite difficult sometimes to do things that aren't interesting to us, or things that we don't really care about or doesn't excite us in any way. And if we're already low on dopamine, how are we going to use that dopamine to take action? So of course we're going to avoid, to be honest, big parts of life, because they are not of interest. So there's all these annoying things that we have to do, life admin and housework and all this other crap, when really we just want to do our special interests. So we are going to avoid all of those things which actually demand time of us, because otherwise things just fall apart, really. And then we might get stuck in a loop then, or we're not good enough, we can't even do the basics. But it's because we're so drawn to our special interests, we're sort of forgetting about other things. So it's kind of, like I always say, this isn't a joke. This is serious stuff. When we talk about chemical reactions in the brain and how the body functions, our sensitivity to emotions, things like that, this is serious stuff. It's not easy. It can be really, really hard. So no wonder things like this will show up. So your thoughts there, Alice, is kind of...
Sorry, I was just going to say about that. I was just going to say, because also with kind of that true PDA profile, demands can show up that people don't perceive as demands, even if it's things that you want to do. That is an internal demand on you, which I think also interlinks in so much with executive functioning, of wanting to be able to do something, but the ability to do it. Plus, then if you kind of perceive it as a demand and as an expectation, it makes it even harder to do, achieve. Then all the guilt, the shame, and all those negative emotions come into it as well. So it can look like avoidance, it can look like depression, because you're just not engaging in the things that you want to do, especially if there's executive functioning differences as well. And I think that's why it's so huge, and often it is just perceived as, oh, you're just not doing it because you don't want to, or because it is these things, whereas actually it is that nervous system response of anxiety, fight, fright, but often freeze, of that I just physically can't, even though everything in me wants to, but my body is saying it's a demand. Then I've got some other stuff as well piling into that.
Yeah, it's just a sense that it's not just a thought process. It's not like we're in our brain saying, I don't want to do that. It's so much more than just a thought that pops into our mind and a bit of resistance.
Mm.
Because, what we resist persists, as they would say, and also what we resist causes suffering because, we're holding and grasping onto things, but also pushing things away. In life, that is the essence of not being able to be present in this moment and feeling free. So there is sort of deeper spiritual stuff going on here and who we are as humans and how we experience life. It's not just neurodivergent brain types. But yeah, it's an interesting one. So Philippa, what for me, knowing how to deal with it, I try and lighten it up a bit. So I sing a little song. So if my partner asks me to do something, I'll be like, I'll do what I want. And she laughs because I will do it. I'll definitely do it. But can I say that I came up with it or something, or I'm going to do it in a minute. So I just sing that song and it's really fun and it lightens it up. But, how can we kind of, I don't know, not kind of hate's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? It affects our self-worth. Are we good enough? Can we actually do anything? We can't even do the basics. Maybe we can't turn up to work on time or whatever it may be. And it can actually really affect our sense of self and if we're good enough to do things. And I think that's really, really sad. So yeah, what are your thoughts there about how we can sort of keep our sense of that we can do good and we can achieve whilst also dealing with this?
Yeah, I think as a therapist, it's all about flipping the narrative. It has to be. And what you said at the beginning about the hunter-gatherer experience of, how humans used to be, I think if we remind ourselves maybe of how we've evolved and how life maybe was once upon a time, really our environment was really well built for us. And we had really fantastic skill sets to do loads of those things back in those days, right? But now the world's changed so much that it's recognizing that our brains maybe haven't evolved as quickly as the world has evolved, and that there's a mismatch between our neurotype and our environment, and understanding that. And sometimes in therapy, it's about I can't offer solutions or suggestions to certain things. It's about stepping back and acknowledging that you're part of a system that it's not working very well, and to try and conceptualize that and frame that in a way that it's not your fault. It's not your fault that it's like this, and there might be some things that we can do to work on, and there might be, but it's not all on the individual to change everything about themselves. It's also recognizing that the systems are set up in such a way that make life really, really difficult for certain neurotypes. So I know it probably doesn't sound that helpful, but it is about just sometimes that reframe in how we think about ourselves and how we see ourselves can be really validating.
Yeah, I think it's just finding, I said earlier, finding our way to, if we can, build a life, I guess, that serves both us and those around us. I don't know. It's not as simple as that, is it? Because sometimes a lot of it's circumstantial. But I think that is a big part of it. If you are going to be self-employed, it's like, how can you have people around you that can support you on that journey and build your business, but also you having control of every step of the way. And the thing is, you can't control inflow of cash and all that sort of stuff. So that creates other issues. So it's like you said, people will start a job and then they'll quit, another job and they'll quit, and they're not seeing the pattern. And maybe they need to go into a different company or into the charity sector where it's less intense steps of management. I don't know, but then it reduces our options, doesn't it? It reduces our scope for what we can apply for. So it can be really, really complicated. And Alice, in kind of the work that you've done so far in assessment, but also with speech and therapy stuff, is this? Do you see this coming up? How common is it compared to all the other things that we tend to discuss in these sort of topics? Are you seeing it or not?
Yeah, I think it is really common, and I think that because PDA is out there, I would say more so when kind of assessing kids, and parents will talk about that, because I think parents ask kids to do stuff. They have to do things in school. They have to follow instructions. They don't have as much autonomy because they are a child. So I think that comes up kind of more obvious, I guess, for them. Whereas actually adults, kind of when you then probe, and it's about asking the right questions, because I think that's the thing. in assessments, I can't diagnose you as PDA. So if you are neurodivergent, but then it's asking the right questions of how does that show up for you? How's your job? And is it, they've got a system where they watch how many hours I do every day. And actually for some people, it's that physical repulsion that pushes you away from it. Whereas actually, oh, well, I've got a manager who says, as long as I get the work done, I can have a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day and I've finished the work. And it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think it is so common, but I think with adults, it's asking the right questions so that they do maybe understand that profile of them, because it's not as obvious maybe. And I think when you do talk about work of like, oh, actually that kind of those demanding situations, you can see that. And I think even when I'm assessing, I like to kind of offer bit of educational advice, and it's simple things like even within yourself of I need to do this, this and this. Should we make a tiny change? And I could do the washing up, the washing and the hoovering. By saying could, it takes off a bit of that demand. I need to do it. And simple things, if there's tasks around the house that gets that real internal feeling or whatever it is for you, that how PDA shows up, if say it's the washing up, buy some paper plates and then you avoid that demand entirely. Yes, that's kind of financially more expensive maybe, but actually if that makes your life easier and actually you're going to benefit from that, it can be really small tweaks, language tweaks, practical things that you build into your life, but it is about that understanding. And I think just if say someone were to be a fly on the wall watching assessments, the conversation would come up more with talking to parents about their children. And I think that is purely because of a role a child has as opposed to an adult. And I think when you speak about adults, it is of whether, and not always that you lose your job, but actually there's just been thing after thing. And when you whittle down to it, there's other things within that, but actually it is really hard. And when you look at me, I've gone freelance and everything's a lot better because I can organise my own diary, I can do what I want as long as I make the money. But yeah, and I think it is really common, more obviously talked about with children, I'd say.
Yeah, I think you're going to get demand avoidance even within entrepreneurship. There's things that you need to do in business, like, tax return, for example. They're still there. There's still demands. And I think, as we sort of wrap up this topic, it's just some finishing points on when working through what life demands of us, how we can find ways to get the job done, I suppose. So habit stacking is another one, so if there's something that, oh my God, I do not want to do it. How can you do something else that you love to do at the same time? And then also that really helps you with brain chemicals and stuff as well. So I'll need banging tunes. If I'm in Hoover, I need some banging tunes. If I'm going to wash up, banging tunes, or a podcast that talks about films. I just love to zone in, find it really interesting what they're saying, and I'm physically doing what I need to do with my hands. So it's kind of, I'm a habit stacker guy. That's just how I pull everything off, really. And it really, really works for me, especially at work. I'm sole responsibility to break down delivery, get it prepped for the rest of the team to take upstairs. It sounds quite stressful. It isn't, because I'm in full control of how I break it down, in what order I break it down, how it's laid out, how I give it to people. I couldn't ask for any more control than I have. So control is a big part of all of this, I think. And I have lots of it at work, which is why I've done 6 years in a very boring role, but I have made it not boring for me. I made it a challenge. I made it interesting. And I can listen to podcasts all night and listen to music. And I don't have to see people that often. I've sculpted something. So maybe that's what we do. So Philippa, what are your thoughts there? As we wrap up, when we're looking at how we can get the job done, for me, it's habit stacking. Have you got any other ideas?
I think habit stacking is a great one. I think, riding the dopamine wave of something else is a good one as well. So if there's something, building in rewards for yourself. So if there's something you have to get done and it's mundane and it's not a task that you enjoy, is to build in a reward for yourself in some way. It could be that you spend 5 minutes doing something like whatever your special interest is, or I can't say what that would be, but finding reward systems within that. And so, Alice mentioned about being self-employed. I know that's not an option for everybody, but the only way that I could sustain a career that kept me engaged was to build my own, to curate my own career, because there is so much variety in what I do that I'm never bored. So I think that that's also key as well, is just variety and making sure there's enough reward built into your day and your life overall, that it keeps it feeling interesting and new and exciting in some way.
Yeah, I like that. There are ways, we just need to understand ourselves best. I guess that's why it's so good to have a therapist or a coach or whatever it may be, just to help you kind of tap into stuff that you know is there, but you just can't see it right now consciously. And we all have our ways. So, Alice, any last minute thoughts about anything that you do or you've seen people do? You think, oh, that's a really cool or interesting way to get the job done. I'm going to keep using that sentence because I quite like it.
But and I was going to say at the end, I was like, no, that is going to be the thing that is on repeat in my head, because it's Bob the Builder, can we get the job done? So that's going to be in my head all day, because that's where my brain goes. I think I try to have it stack. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but I think it is that kind of breaking down for me the demands, because yes, as self-employed, there is still lots of things that I definitely don't like doing, and actually my body repulses it, and in certain situations, but I can't change it. I will have to do it at some point. So I almost kind of talk myself through it, of the fact that this is how I'm feeling, this is how it makes me feel, but that is okay, because that's part of me as well. Like, all part of that self-acceptance and radical acceptance of that is the way my brain is. I'm not necessarily going to be able to turn that switch to take that reaction off. Yes, that reaction might alter, but actually identifying it and pinpointing it in different situations, and then kind of trial and error, trying different things. And if it doesn't work, all right, we'll try another one. And I think lots of it for me is taking away the guilt and shame away from it, because I think, especially as a late diagnosed adult, there's already so much of that, and it's like, can't take any more. So actually identifying it, say, like, that is what that shows up for me. It's okay. How can I navigate it? Let's try this way or this way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we haven't really touched on that, have we? Yeah, that sort of working around the shame and how we meet this experience, how we feel about ourselves and opinion of ourselves in that. So that's really, really powerful. I think, just to wrap up, we said near the beginning about just choice, really, like I would with my stepson. I've heard other parents do this, giving a child the two options. They both need to be done today. You don't have to be really obvious about it, right? These two must be done. It's like, which one do you prefer to do first? Seems to really work in our household. And if I'm thinking about my inner child, my poor inner child that maybe wasn't met or given that when I was younger, I can do that to myself in any given moment, be my inner child. So, not me, but for him, it would be, would you prefer to shower first, because he finds that difficult, or play the Hot Wheels cars first after gaming? Gaming finishes. What do you want to do? Should we go and have a shower and put some tunes on, or should we do Hot Wheels cars? And he will mix it up each time. It turns out he feels like, let's get the shower done. And then he lights up, There's something very powerful about giving a child a bit of autonomy like that. Because in school, as an NDer, sit down, stop talking, don't do that. You're losing some break time because you are being too hyper or something. These poor kids are just getting battered all day. Least we can do is give them a sense of empowerment, I suppose, a skill that I think we all deserve to have. So that's a nice way to end there, which is great. So we really hope this is helpful, everybody. Let us know if there's topics that you're really, really keen on us guys talking about. Just DM us or send us the email address in the description of this podcast, and we're more than happy to dive on in. Hopefully we'll give some sort of wisdom at the end as well that you can take away. Right, where can we find you online, Philippa? Where are we going to check out your content?
On Instagram at flourish_with_Philippa, and on my website, which is flourish-counselling.co.uk.
Amazing. All the links in the show notes for that one. And Alice, where can we go and check you out?
So I am on LinkedIn, personal one, Alice Cantwell, and Bold Minds ND has one. Facebook and Instagram, I'm both at Bold Minds ND, and then our website, boldmindsnd.com.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, links in the show notes. I really encourage people to come follow you and see what you two are up to. You're both doing amazing work, and if this can lead to you, any people to you, then I'll be so happy. So yeah, please do, guys, go and check it out. Stick around for the outro. You hear a little bit more about partners that we're working with and things like that. So please do stick around and enjoy the tunes. And we'll see you in our next episode, episode 7, where we'll be answering listeners' questions. Thank you to everyone listening. We really hope these podcast episodes help you. And thank you so much to all of those that send us the questions. You can do that via DMs on our social media channels, or send an email over to us at ndandfree@gmail.com. This podcast is in partnership with the following wonderful companies, services, and those who support those with neurodivergence. For neurodivergent assessments, visit boldmindsnd.com. to explore Alice's services. For therapy for NDers, visit flourish-counselling.co.uk to see how Philippa can help you. To train as an ADHD coach with a fully accredited training course, visit barrettcoachingandtraining.com to find how Esther and her team can help you.